Hello, and welcome to the first class video for the hybrid Spring 24. Um, this one is going to be covering exclusively the outline for the public speaking course. And just FYI, like I said in the class, there are two participations going to be on this one because this is going to be two, since we were behind, this is actually two videos in one where I'll be covering the whole outline and even including how to write the outline. And so this is actually a great video for you to go back to because you're going to use the same outline 3 times. Because I am filming today from the wonderful campus of Southgate, ELAC Southgate Satellite Campus. Um, and I'm going to try to shoot these videos at home in the future because I have better internet and system and setup, but I gotta make what's due. So when I'm doing the split screen, I'll probably be turning off my camera so that way I can try to make sure it doesn't freeze or anything like that. So just FYI. If you have questions about anything from this video, just message me directly on Canvas. All right. So we're going to get into the outline, like the basic 101 of it. All right. So let's get going. There we go. Share screen. And the first screen I'm going to share with you. Now, your Canvas is not up yet because everything just came in all at once with this class, meaning that I just got access, you guys just got access to Canvas. And as I stated in class, I am not going to be posting until you guys start having stuff. So I'm actually making this video before I start posting stuff. I actually posted the outlines already so I can show it to you. So just a quick rundown. And by the way, in the first announcement, I linked two previous courses videos about how I run the syllabus and how I run Canvas. So for those who missed it, that class, or just want to review, that will be accessible onto announcements. All right. So as you are aware, we only use the first um, things, home discussions, announcements. You haven't seen it yet because I haven't posted any announcements. Assignments, they haven't been posted yet. But right here, I just want to focus on files. So whenever you're looking for the outline or any important documents for this course, that includes the evaluation form and of course the syllabus. You just click on the files, and sure enough, there you go. You will see the outline. Or wait, yeah, you will see the outline. So just FYI. And one of the easiest ways to do this now, whenever you save it, remember you have to submit it on either PDF or a doc. Do not ever submit it via pages or anything that is not docs or PDF. PDF is the safest choice. So if I go over here, let's say if I have an Apple computer, um, for example, and I click on this thing, it'll come up eventually. All you really need to do is copy, oops, you don't even have to download it. Just copy, highlight everything, copy it, and then copy and paste it into your document. Try to make it, and this is very important, try to make this look as much like the document as possible. You see how it has these spaces and so forth. Try to make it look as much like this as possible, not just for me, but for you as well. All right. And so forth. And here's another bit of advice. When you do that and when you put it over into Google Docs or Microsoft Word or however you're going to write up your outlines, before you start typing, save it. Save it as a template. And then every time you work on it again, you can always go to that template. So you don't have to copy and paste it every time you start a new outline. All right. But this is where you get it. You go to files in Canvas and all the important docs, the syllabus, the evaluations, and the outline, which you will use for all three speeches. Blah, blah, blah. All right. a little bit tired already. All right, let's get going. Okay, so I'm gonna stop share real quick, get out of here. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna stay in here because we're gonna talk about. Oh no, I want to use the other one instead. So let me get out of here. By the way, that picture of me is from a wedding I performed. I think I told you in class I'm a ordained minister. So if you know anyone that needs to get married, I'm cheap. All right, let's see. Okay, I queued that up. All right, let's go back into shared screen. There's the outline. All right, so I have right here a Word doc, right? I downloaded it in Word doc. Actually, this is my own original, so just FYI. Now, before I continue, I just want to say this real quick. Um, I hate when it does this. Give me a moment, guys. I just have to change something so I can page width. All right, here we go. Okay, I fixed it. All right. Anyways, um, before I continue, I just want to give credit to where this came from. So by the way, if you ever notice spelling errors, it's not me. It's actually this is from or grammar errors. This is actually from Cal State LA. And actually, it's a very good outline. This is the outline I actually recommend to students to keep because especially when you transfer to or you go for my high school dual enrollment courses, when you go into the 4-year college and especially the third and fourth year, you're gonna have to write longer papers. You're gonna have to not write, 3 pages. You're gonna have to write 10 pages, and this outline is actually really good for that because it kind of sets you up for a really good introduction. So keep this around not just for this course but for future courses as well. But this is a really great public speaking outline, so also keep it for that reason as well. Um, so yeah, and so this is from Cal State LA. I have made some slight changes and I have a different philosophy on some of this stuff, and we'll get to those, but don't worry. But I try to keep it as close to Cal State LA as possible because again, the important citation and also just appreciation for where the source material. All right. And don't tell them I said that. All right. So anyway, name, section, date, that's not important. Just make sure your name and date's on it. You might want to put here, not rough or final draft, just put the speech draft. So your first excuse me, your first speech would be a good title or future planning speech or special interest speech. So that's what you would put rough to final. That's not important. But what is important is these sections. All right. And so um, we're going to go over the introduction first, and then I'm going to go over the main points. And your first participation will be coming up after the introduction. So keep that in mind. Again, they're not going to be written down. They're going to be hidden in the videos, as I stated in class. Okay, so first off, there's the introduction. And each of these are very important, right? Each of these are very important sections, and each of them have a role. Your introduction, one thing you need to know. Your actual speech is actually down here, your main points. This is where your bread and butter is. This is your meat and potato, your tofu and rice. That's down here, the main point. This is where you put your references, your examples, your explanation, your reasoning. This is where you put that stuff, right? Your storytelling. It's all here. But the introduction, which we're going to be starting on, is still the most important part of your speech, even though it's not your speech, because it sets up your entire speech. I'll say it again. Your introduction is just setup. That's it. You're not putting references in there. You're not explaining anything. You're just telling them stuff. And they have these nice little sections to help fill the time. You should, like, your first speech, your second speech are 5-minute speeches, right? You should take about a minute 15 seconds to a minute to minute 15 seconds to do it. If you go below 45 seconds, your intro is actually even below 50 seconds, your intro is way too short. If you go above 130, your intro is too long. All right. So to help get the best time possible, you have these sections, and each section has that role. And by doing each section, you also fill that time. All right. First things first. Oh, wait, I don't have the screen on, so it doesn't matter. My lights just went out inside this room. Um, this is funny. All right, so the first thing is the attention getter. The attention getter is exactly how it sounds. You're trying to draw your audience into your speech. Now, this is a good thing to understand about your speeches. Not everyone knows your subject. Your first speech is about you, like what you're going to be, how you're going to get there. You're telling a story, right? You're telling a story about where you started and where you're going to end up. And to do that, you got to choose a career. All right. Here's the thing, not everyone knows that career that you're going to choose. I mean, yeah, sure, everyone knows what a lawyer and a nurse is, but what if you are a specialty, right? Like, okay, we understand what a contract lawyer might be, but what's an entertainment lawyer? Or you might just be a job that not many people know or have any connection with. We all know what engineers are, but you know, an engineer is also what they call people who drive the trains. So I mean, not everyone's going to know it. So attention getter is a great way to lead your audience into your subject. And usually it's something that gets their attention, right? Or draws them in, or it kind of explains the subject matter in a quick little bit. So how do you draw their attention? Well, the best ways to draw their attention is a quote or a fact. Now, when it comes to facts, it can't just be like a basic fact. It has to be something that hits them over the head. So for example, recently a poll came out that said 81% of Americans have a problem with Joe Biden, President Biden's age, right? Well, no duh. I mean, that's not surprising. I mean, there's polls are coming out still that he still leads the presidential race. But yeah, people who don't like him and like him, both people who vote or don't vote for him, have a problem with him being older. It's not just his age, that he represents a generation that's not popular right now. He represents boomers. So that's not a fact that surprises people. But what might be a fact that surprises people is, like, you take the other person in the election, former President Trump, like or dislike him, he's going through a lot right now. And what if 81% of Americans said, and now I'm not saying this is a real thing, but what if 81% of Americans said that they're willing to vote for him, even though the insurrection, sorry about that, insurrection, the um, the indictments, all the scandals and all that stuff, and how he performed and stuff like that. I mean, he still might win the election, but 81% would be something like hit him over the head type stuff. So if you use a fact, make sure it's something that is like, whoa, not okay, I already know that. Do you understand the difference there? I try to stay away from facts as an attention getter. A quote works, especially if a quote kind of previews it, right? But here's the thing. Some people are quoted way too much. So I banned Gandhi quotes because people use Gandhi quotes all the time and they always misuse them. And I want to give you a heads up. Martin Luther King Jr. Quotes. I'm never going to ban MLK Jr. because I don't want to be in the news as white professor bans MLK. No, 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 no. But the reason why I give you a heads up on it is everyone uses those too. And they misuse both Gandhi and MLK Jr. They both get misused all the time. So while Gandhi is banned, I always warn students be cautious about Martin Luther King Jr. just because it's used so much and it's misused all the time. But there's lots of different quotes out there that kind of lead your audience into your speech, right? But okay, and then there's anecdotes. Anecdotes are good. Anecdotes are quick little stories, right? But the best one is by far better than all the ones I gave examples of is an analogy. Analogies are awesome. They are great. And so your attention getter could be an analogy. Your first speech is about where you're heading in life, right? So what if you're like the one I always use is, do you ever find yourself driving down a long road and you see where you're heading in the distance, but you get distracted with all the trees passing you by? That's how I feel about my future. And then it leads into the speech, right? Because that analogy gives audience a kind of um a sense of where you're leading them, right? You're leading them into a future, story or, a destination story. Or another example is I have a student this semester, and I've had students who've done this before who are want to be anesthesiologists, right? The people who knock out people before they go into surgery. And And so they can't just jump in and say anesthesiologist because not many people know what that person is or even the official title. But what they can say is something like, do you ever find yourself needing to take a nap to recharge, a siesta, or whatever you want to call it? It's when you have to, take some time off to try to work things out. That's what I want to do when it comes to people going to surgery. See how that works? You kind of lead them into it because we all have taken naps. We've all done that stuff. So that's what an attention getter does. It eases your audience into it. Not too long. It's about 2, 3 sentences worth of speaking. So not that long, actually. Background. Background is the next section. I should highlight these when I'm on. So we just did attention getter. We just did attention getter. All right, that's where we were. Now we're going to go into background. Background. Background is not a background on your speech. People make the mistake where it's they think they have to like explain their whole speech in background or something of that nature. Nothing like that at all. What background is, oh, excuse me. What background is essentially you're telling your audience a background on your thesis, whatever your thesis is. All right. And so it's important to understand that it's just you giving a background on your thesis. So if your thesis is saying, I'm going to be a doctor someday, right? That's your thesis. I'm going to be a doctor. You would say something like you go into your attention getter and then you go into your background. Becoming a doctor has always been a dream of mine. It's somewhere where I can help my community and also have financial stability for the rest of my life. Right? That's it. Just a background on the thesis. That's it, right? You're not giving facts, you're not reasoning, you're not giving an explanation. You're just getting like 2 quick sentences about what, just a preview of what you're going to actually talk about with your thesis. That's it. That's all it is. Let's get into audience relevance and speaker credibility. Audience relevance and speaker credibility is actually pretty simple. You got to ask yourself 2 questions. So what I mean by that is let's ask the first question. Audience relevance. The first question is why them? Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, by the way. This could be in a question on the midterm. Audience relevance. Why them? Why the audience? Why should they care? Right? So if you're speaking in front of a elderly group of seniors and you want to talk about contributing to some cause somewhere, then you got to explain to them why should senior citizens care about your speech. In this speech, your audience relevance is really easy. I'm going to talk about my future, and we're all college students. So, by the way, you can totally take my example. This one you can take. We're all college students. So, I figure maybe my examples can give you some ideas. That's it. Why should they listen to you? Because I can give you ideas, right? That's all it is. As audience relevance. It's just why them? Why should they be sitting for your speech, right? Speaker credibility, the question is why you? Why you? Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Why you? It's a simple idea where you are telling your audience, hey, this is why you should listen to me, right? When I introduced myself in the class, I told you my education. I said, hey, I have these stupid degrees that lets me stand in front of you and explain public speaking. right? And same thing with political science and so forth, right? That's my speaker credibility when it comes to being able to teach. Um, your speaker credibility is like really easy because you don't have to say you're an expert, but your first speaker credibility is super easy because you're an expert on yourself. So you would say something like, "Yeah, I know what I want to be in the future. I've done my research, so hopefully you will know what all about my path." Or something like that, right? You just all you're saying is I've done my, and by the way, the speaker credibility is actually really easy for all three speeches, as long as you say I've done my research. Because that's it. Anytime you do any kind of speech as a student, as long as you say you've done your research, you're usually good to go. All right. So why them? Why you? We're gonna skip thesis. I'm gonna tackle that on its own. And I'm gonna go into preview of main points. Preview of main points. Now, most of these sentences, and we'll get into sentence writing later. I want to explain the basic for these, all right? Um, most of your sections are two short sentences, right? Two short sentences. Attention getter, background, audience relevance, speaker credibility, even the thesis, usually two short sentences, not completed sentences, just very short. Preview of main points is actually just one sentence. One sentence. That's all it is. One sentence. And so the reason why we are I got too much. I need to go get something to drink. I'm thirsty. All right. The preview of main points is actually really easy, and you've done this in your English writing classes. Which is you're telling them the three supporting paragraphs, right? Same thing. Your preview main points for your first speech is actually really easy because your first main point is your past, your second is your present, and your third main point is your future. So you would say something like, I'm going to first talk about past, present, and finally my future. Now, of course, you're not going to say that. That's what we call speech lingo, right? Because if everyone came up and said the same thing, I'm going to talk about my past, present, future, you're going to be yawning too. So you say something like, I'm going to talk about the neighborhood I come from. I'm going to talk about my college years. And finally, where I see myself in 10 years. That's it. That's all you do. One sentence. It doesn't have to be an elaborate sentence. In fact, I don't want essay writing. I don't want essay writing. I don't want English course writing. I want basic writing. Don't ever write out your speech. Ever. Finally, there's the thesis. The thesis, this is important. I want you to take everything your English and history teachers ever taught you about thesis writing. I want you to put it all together and I want you to throw that trash away. I'm not saying it's trash. You still use it. You still need to use that for the appropriate courses, but you're taking public speaking. So you need to follow public speaking rules, or at least my rules. All right. And my rules is your thesis is a declarative sentence. All right. The basic declarative sentence. No ands, no ors, no commas. So just think about this for a second. I want you to listen to the words I say right now, and I want you can say it out loud or just say it to yourself. I want you to, I want you to think about the businesses I say when I say their slogans. Just think about it in your head, and let's see you get them right. Um, just do it. Eat fresh. I'm loving it. Uh, have it your way. The last one I got to get into a particular voice. We have the meats, right? So you probably figured out I just did Nike. Uh, I always mess up. I always forget what I did. I think I did Subway, McDonald's, Burger King, and Arby's, right? I did those. And so those are slogans, and you always remember them when you see commercials, right? You see them, you think those things. So what you're doing with the declarative sentence for your thesis is essentially taking a slogan and making it longer. So you're not saying me be doctor. You're not gonna say me be doctor. Doctor the best. Nothing like that. That sounds like a cave person. What you're gonna say is something like, my future leads me down the path of becoming a medical doctor, or I'm going to become a medical physician someday, right? Or something of that nature. Like, you don't want to be too basic. I'm be a doctor. Don't, no, no, no. You have a couple, you make it a little bit more elaborate. But again, no ands, no commas, no ors. Just one sentence saying what you're going to do, what you're going to let your audience know. And in this case, your audience needs to know that you're going to tell them how you're going to become a doctor someday. You're telling that story. This is how I'm going to become a doctor, something like that, right? And I said there's two sentences. And now here's the thing. You can, in a public speaking thesis, you can always follow it up with a flowery sentence. Now, when I say flowery sentence, it's not being disrespectful. Flowery sentence is exactly what it is just you're going to give a sentence saying, oh, excuse me, I need some water. All right. Anyways, um, what you're going to do for your speech is essentially follow it up with a sentence that kind of explains it. So if you say, I'm going to become a doctor someday, then you can say it up. Medicine is the avenue to which I can help my community and also um, create financial wealth for my family, right? Something like that, right? So saying flowery is not disrespectful. It's actually a very respectful phrase to explain that you're adding something, right? You're adding a little bit more to it. So you have your declarative sentence, your thesis, and then you can follow it up with a flowery sentence. All right. So that's it. That's the introduction, the most important part of your speech. We're going to talk about um, writing it out later. But right now, we're going to do our first participation. So when you do a participation for the online portion of this course, what you need to do is in the replies for the day, you need to you need to answer the questions I give you. There's going to be two for this video. Usually there's only one per video, but because of the how far behind. So your first question, and try to put both answers in one reply. All right, one answer and one reply. In your reply, the first one, so put a one dot and then your answer. And your answer should be, what are you going to be in 10 years after your education? Now, remember, I just said 10 years from your education because some of you might have a very long education, right? So 10 years from now, you might be barely getting out of law school or barely getting out of your residency as a doctor or going for another master's as a nurse. I mean, there's so many possibilities. So 10 years from when you finish your education, all right? So that's what your 10 years. So where you see yourself 10 years after your education. If you don't know what you're going to be, for the rest of your life, then choose something that you might be, because this is not etched in stone. I'm not going to come find you. I'm not going to be like 20 years from now going, but you said you were going to be a doctor. How did you become a veterinarian? Right? I'm not going to do that. You choose something, but it has to be something, right? Every semester, I always have one student who tries to be like, I'm going to lead you down the path to explain how I'm going to find myself in the future and not say what they're going to be. You need a starting point, which is like your childhood. That's in main point one, and then an end point, main point three, where you see yourself 10 years after your education is over. So you can see there, that's a story, a beginning and an end. And we're telling stories in here. The story for story is how you're going to find your future. All right. I need to pause this for a second because I need to go grab some water. So let me pause this. We'll be starting it up in 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Um, got me some bubbly water, some soda water. So if I get a little burpy, I apologize in ahead of time. All right. You guys are like too TMI. All right, let's go back to it. I know it's very boring. we usually break this up in classes because, going over the outline in one video is a little bit too much, but this is where we're at. And actually, this is actually a great video for you to have access to. Now, we're going to skip transitions and we're going to talk about the conclusion on another day. All right. Because that's later down the line. And we want to focus on the planning part. And the planning part is your introduction and your main points. And I have the main points in front of me right now. All right. Every main point is the same. Main point one, main point two, main point three. It's the same structure, which is you give a little summary about what you're going to talk about, and then you focus on two subpoints, right? That's it. You don't, the reason why it's done like this is, and why it should be done like this, is some people come up and when they speak, they think they got to throw everything on the wall and see what sticks. And they end up, you know, unfocused. And honestly, they sound like they're doing a grocery list. You're not giving us a grocery list. You're not going to come up and say, when it comes to my past, I think about growing up in my neighborhood and my family, and I can't forget my brother, and then there was school and the kids at school. You're not coming up and saying a whole bunch of this random stuff, right? You need to have focus. And the focus is in two parts, subpoint A, subpoint B, right? This is your meat and potatoes, your tofu and rice, right? Your bread and butter. I think I covered every dietary requirement right there. Anyways, so make sure you are aware of that, right? Make sure that you are still yawning. All right. Make sure you're aware of that. Make sure you have that kind of focus on each of your subpoints. And what do I mean by focus? Well, I already told you your first speech, your main point one is your past, your main point two is your present, and your main point three is your future. Right? And then in each of those, you give two examples of that. So when I was your age, or actually, if this is the high school class, yeah, when I was your age, if you're in one of my college age classes, then when I was in high school, I actually wanted to be a film director. I actually got accepted to some film schools. And then halfway through my senior year, I was like, no, I changed my mind. I want to go into politics. And they looked at me and they go, well, we we accepted you on your talent, not your grades. And I was like, fair, that's fair. That's true. My grades were horrible. But anyways, that's the thing. So I'm not bitter. No, I'm just kidding. But that's the thing. So when I was your age or when I was in high school age, I wanted to be a film director. So if I was going to give this speech, my thesis would be you're going to see my name in lights as a successful director, right? And then my past, present, future would have been I'm going to first talk about my rough neighborhood, and then I'm going to talk about my college years, and then finally I'm going to talk about being in the film industry. And that's important to understand. Because that's what I actually wanted to do. And so if let's take the past, for example. I grew up, and some people are surprised when I say this. I grew up in a rough neighborhood with lots of gangs and violence. And I guess I know I look like I'm required by law to watch Yellowstone. Yes, I know. Some of you are like, you made that same joke already. Sorry. But the thing is, that's where I grew up, right? And so if I was going to do a main point summary about where I grew up, I would be saying something, when I think about my neighborhood, I think about all the violence and gangs that we would try to escape any chance of it we could. And we usually do that by watching movies. And we would do that by going to the movie theaters or watching it at somebody's home. That's it. That's a summary. It's like two and a half, 3 sentences saying what you're about to talk about. And then you go into subpoint A and you say something like, movie theaters became a nice little vacation away from the neighborhood because we didn't have any in our neighborhood, but we would save up our money and escape the heat and the local gangs by taking the bus to the Cineplex or whatever, right? And then subpoint B would be like, if we couldn't get to the movie theater, then we would escape the hardships, especially at night, by going to somebody's house. Was some of us were fancy and we had a VHS player and we would watch movies that were rented from the local rental shop. That's it, right? My whole main point one is just talking about my neighborhood and how movies was a way for us to escape. That's it. No laundry list of all these different things. No having to focus on my elementary, middle school years. None of that stuff. I didn't even mention my family. I just mentioned the neighborhood and the fact that movies was an important part of escaping it. Right. And by the way, I could have been, it didn't have to be the violence I was escaping. I think maybe one of my other friends was escaping his home life. Actually, I know definitely two of them were escaping their home life. Actually, I should say my home life wasn't that great either, but theirs was. And so one I wouldn't even mention, even if you asked me. So yeah, you don't have it. It could be like I could have done the same thing, and it didn't have to be the rough neighborhood and escapism. It could have been, there was a serious problem at home, and movies was a way for me to forget about those troubles. I would maybe join my friends to the movie theaters, or go to somebody else's house and watch, you know, the latest flick. See how that works? You just have to have that focus. Same thing with all the main points. Main point two, college. Actually, your main point two. By the way, this is your college years, not what you're doing right now. So this is from when you start your education in the for the high school students class, um, high school level class. Imagine your dual enrollment class being in college right now. So your college years, your graduations, you already started your college years. And when you graduate or when you finish your education, that's the end of. I mean, you don't have to tell the whole story, but I'm just saying that's the window of time. Because some students think the future is like right after they graduate, and that's not the case. Your future, main point three, is 10 years. 10 years from the end of your degree. Now, before I get into writing, I'm going to give you and suggestions on writing. I'm going to give you your next participation. But to give your next participation, and this is your final participation for this video, please keep watching this video because it's going to be important about how to write after this. But your participation, your second one is this. Well, let me explain what this is. Okay, so in your second and third speech, you have what we call citations, right? You have to do research and you have to cite your sources. And you have to, according to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, stuff like that. Your first speech doesn't require any research, but you do have to cite something, not a source, but in this case, your citation is a practice citation, and your citation is you. Your citation is you, a cultural community reference, right? A cultural community reference. And what I mean by cultural community reference is some part of you that has a little story to it. So, first things first, nothing boring. Like for me, I'm a straight white male. Boring, boring, boring. All three of those are overrepresentative. There's no struggle there. You know, I don't care what some news sites say. It's just boring, right? And so if there's anything that might be anything of, no real hardship or no real, lack of representation or anything, there's no real story to it. So try to find culture community reference that has it. So for me, for example, I use growing up poor, growing up in that neighborhood. That's my community reference, right? So whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Don't TMI, don't nothing too much where you might cause an emotional reaction when you give your speech, right? I always give the example when I was in your shoes taking public speaking. there was a student in my group, and the thing was, who's your hero? And she chose her dead mother. And it was actually a beautiful speech when it started off, but halfway through, she just stopped and couldn't give a speech, couldn't finish her rest of her speech. You're gonna hear me talk about my professor, my public speaking professor, because he wasn't that great at his job. And one of the things he didn't do right was when that happened, he didn't do anything. He just let her stand there in front of everybody. And it was me turning to our fellow group person, and she was this awesome, awesome older woman who was a mother. And I'm just gonna say she's African American, had that kind of motherly comfort, kind of what you might have seen in movies and so forth. And it was awesome. All I did was turn to her and I go get her. And she was just like, boom, I'm all motherly and just went right to it. And it was outstanding. I always, there's always people in your past that you hope to run into again. I hope to run into that woman again. She was awesome. Anyways, but I don't want any students to have that kind of problem up there. So don't do anything that's too TMI and might cause an emotional reaction. But I have students talk about you know, being Latin American, right? Immigrant family, African American, women, gay. Um, um, I had a Muslim student one time. There's so many different things to go with. A lot of poverty stories, and so forth, right? Or low income and so forth. So lots of different options there. So sorry. And by the way, just real quick, if you do have one of those boring ones, but you still want to use it, I did have a student one time do a speech. She was from an affluent part of LA. Her school where it happened was actually in a very impoverished part of LA, but there was this affluent part that was on the outskirts, right? And she was from that neighborhood, and she actually talked about being wealthy because wealthy is pretty boring. There's no struggle there. But she did talk about becoming from an affluent part of LA. And she said it's her responsibility as someone who came from privilege to do. So you can actually do one of those boring ones. Like if I said about being a straight man or a white guy or a male, like, hey, I need to do my part as a man to, compensate for all the horrible men out there who do, this bad thing or whatever. So you can use the boring ones, right? So how do you use them? You need to cite only once, and I only want you to cite once in one of your main points, not your introduction, in one of your main points. So main point one, main point two, or main point three. Choose one of them and then have one of the subpoints be a focus of it, right? You would obviously mention it in the summary, but then you would then mention it again in one of the subpoints. So for me, I did the rough neighborhood and I did it in the past. I talked about, growing up in the rough neighborhood with gangs. And then I talked about, like, for example, the VHS, escaping at night, because that was a real problem. At night was a real problem in that neighborhood, especially summer nights. So, so be aware of that, right? Be aware of that. That's a way to do it. I've had students, let me give you a bunch of examples. And by the way, you can use any of these examples, right? As long as it's actually you. So there's a popular one with Latin and African American students talking about mental health and the stigma of mental health, because some of the students are wanting to get into mental health services, and they talk about their past, about they couldn't talk about being depressed in their household. And then there's even people going into health. There are some folks, and like my dad was one of them, who didn't like going to a doctor. There you go. That's another one right there. And that one, actually, being afraid of going to a doctor, that's not necessarily an ethnicity thing. Because like I can bring up my doctor. I mean my doctor, my dad as an example. Men don't like going to the doctors. So changing that stigma, for example. I have had, and so there's lots of paths, right? Students who want to get into law enforcement talk about growing up in a bad neighborhood. I've had teachers, people want to be teachers, having that one teacher because they had some kind of issue was their identifier, right? Those are all things. And by the way, when I talk about culture community reference, it doesn't have to be ethnicity or gender. It could be, like I said, community reference. So I use being growing up in a rough neighborhood. I've had like if you're in the if you know someone in the military, like if you're from a military family, that's a culture, that's a community reference because that military life is something completely different. Let's see what else is there. I've had students talk about being an outcast as a nerd. That's a community reference. So there's lots of different things. If you have questions about it, talk to me. Talk to me before or after class or during if you're in one of my long classes during a break. There is um, present. A lot of students use present because there's a lot of representation there, like taking Latin American studies. But a lot of students talk about when it comes to the present and main point two, if they use their culture community reference, it's like being a part of a club, especially with gay straight alliance clubs. Um, any of my students who identify as gay or trans have usually used they usually use past maybe bullying, but a lot of them use main point two, which is used for the clubs, helping with identity and so forth. Main point three, a lot of students use cultural community reference to say what kind of representation they're gonna bring in the future. There's a lot of students who are part of gender or ethnicity or group that's underrepresented, right? And so when they bring themselves to any kind of profession that's underrepresented, they're increasing representation. I had a female student who talked about being in construction and how there's no really any women in construction, especially contractors. That was interesting. So representation is a popular one in 8.3. So I hope I give you ideas. You can always talk to me. So here is participation two. Ready? Participation two. Participation two is pretty simple. Just 2 point something, and then say whatever your culture community reference. Mine is rough neighborhood. Yours can be, Latino, Latina, African American, Jehovah Witness, gay, non-binary, whatever it is, right? Culture, community, rough neighborhood, military lifestyle, whatever it is, and post what it is that you're going to use, and then put what main point are you going to do, past, present, or future. Right? Just think. I'll give you a second. Think about it, and then go to replies, put it in. You can now put in both answers. So the rest of the video talks about how to write this stuff. All right, let's keep going. Ugh. You think this video is long for you? It's long for me. I have to make this. All right. So even before I get into the writing part and how to do the sentences, I'm going to show you a little trick I like to do called keyword outlines, right? So you come around and you put this in past. Oops. By the way, I'm a bad speller. I will spell poorly, right? By the way, forget about transitions, conclusion, that's another day. So right here, we know what these are about, right? These are what these things are about. I'm going to change the words, right? Because we're not going to actually say past, present, future. You can do whatever, keyword and whatever, right? This is not your outline. Your outline will not have keywords. I'll say again, your outline will not have keywords like this. This is just pre-planning. I usually show you how to do this with a whiteboard. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use this. All right. So you'll lose points if you do this keyword stuff or turn keyword stuff in. College. Right. But all you do is think about, okay, what am I going to generally focus on, right? What am I generally going to focus on? And by doing that, you then have an idea of what sentences you're going to write. What are you going to what are you going to say and stuff like that. So for example, I'm going to write foot, right? Foot doesn't make sense to you. Makes sense to me because I'm looking at it and thinking about getting my foot in the door in the film industry, right? And then that name, you guys don't understand what name is. So if you turn in just the word name, I would look at it and go, I don't know what you're thinking. But right now, when I'm planning and brainstorming, I'm looking at that going, oh, I know here I'm going to talk about making a name for myself in the film industry by creating short films to show at film festivals. There you go. So that's how it works. And then you expand for there. So let's go back up here real quick. We're going to go into all these things and we're not going to do all of them, but I'm going to show you what I mean by this stuff, right? Remember what I said earlier about my attention getter. I said, driving down a long road, sometimes you look off into the distance and you see where you're going to end up. But as you're driving, you might get distracted by the trees and lose focus. That's how I think about my future, right? I'm not going to say write all those words. Heck no. I'm just going to come up here and go driving long distance, distracted by trees. Now, am I going to actually give a speech and go driving long distance, distracted by trees? No, of course not. I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. But I'm going to look at that and I know when I write my notes for the speech, I'm pretty much going to be using the same words, right? So just short little sentences to kind of give a brief summary what you're going to be talking about. Right? When I come up and say film director sound good, art and finance. No, of course not. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say something simple like, um, when I think about my future, I think about how becoming a film director sounds like a really plausible idea. And it also provides me a way to get my art out there while providing a financial future. That's it, right? As your teacher, I look at this and I go, "Oh, they're going to be talking about being a film director. It's how it sounds good, and it's about art and finance. It's a simple idea, right? Okay, so why am I showing you how to write this simple stuff, right? Right? Oh, by the way, let me show you what one sentence looks like. Remember, I told you preview main points. Then you have to be a full sentence. You could still use the basic short sentences, but you just one sentence talk about neighborhood, college, and oops, film industry. Now you're not gonna come up and go, let me talk about neighborhood, college, and film industry. No, of course I'm not gonna talk like that. But I'm gonna say, well, first I'm gonna talk about where the neighborhood I grew up in, the college, my college years, and finally how I'm gonna make it in the film industry. Right? That's all I'm gonna do. Just real quick, short sentence writing, and it's even a basic sentence when you say it. So why write like this? Why? Well, because you do not want to read off your speech ever. Think about this for a second. Think about you reading a book or an essay or an article, right? How many of you, say it in your head, pretty much everybody, have ever lost your place when you're reading and you have to find it and go back and look for it? Well, imagine doing that when you're speaking in front of people. How much harder it is to look and find your place. I've seen it firsthand. It's not pretty. So don't do it. Don't give yourself that option or don't put yourself in that situation. The other reason why you don't write out your speech is, well, let's say I'm gonna find something. Here's directions for the lectern PC that I'm in front of me in this classroom. Ready? I'm going to read the sentence. To project your files and turn off projector, please log out or shut down at the conclusion of your class. Now that sounds pretty normal, right? When you're reading or practicing your speech and you wrote out your speech, you're thinking that's how I'm going to sound. Nope. Never works out like that. So I might have read it that way, but when I have the people in front of me, I might start doing it like this. And most people do this. To project your files and turn off projector, please log out and shut down at the conclusion of your class. You go fast. So a 5-minute speech becomes 340. Oh, you lose points. Most of the time when people read off their speeches, they read quicker than they normally read. And then occasionally it sounds like this. To project your files and turn off projector, please log out or shut down at the conclusion of your class. On a rare occasion, students will talk along. So don't ever write out your speech. Let me say it again. Never write out your speech. All right. Remember I told you first day, whatever things people ever told you in another class, English, history, Spanish, Mandarin, whatever class, social sciences, whatever class you had to take, you had to give a speech. Throw out that. They don't know what they're talking about. They're not public speaker. I'm a public speaker. Remember, every time I'm on a campus, I'm the best public speaker on that campus. So when I tell you this is the best way to do it, where you elaborate off of notes, that's how you do it. And so when you're elaborating off notes, it's best to do your outline in that kind of short sentences. All right. Never write out your speech. If you have questions about this, you message me on campus. Okay. All right. So we know what we had to do. The participations, I told you, it's hidden inside the video. So for those people who come to the end of the video hoping for me to review it, I will not. All right. And you can't see other people's until you post your own. So yeah, make sure you participate. So if you have any questions on this, talk to me in class or message me over Canvas. All right. Let me get back to the thing so I can say a proper goodbye. Oh. So you can see the illustrator. I'm in front of a whiteboard. I make it sound like it's a basic class. It's not a basic class. I mean, okay, even the walls are basic. I'm not gonna lie. Ooh, I'll show you this one thing. You ready? Before I go. Maybe this will be the thumbnail. Whoa. This is in the top right above me when I'm teaching in this room. This guy. He used to be a giant skeleton that I had to cover up when students gave their speeches. So this is kind of distracting. It'd be horrible if someone, this is walking across while I'm giving a speech. Looks behind him. Hey, what's going on? All right. All right. All right. That's the class. Do the participation. Is the record.